the buyers that bought my company, I'm like, just don't even worry about taking money out of it. Just keep putting money in and don't take anything out. And in a couple of years, you'll be in a position that you can take on any job that comes your way. You never have to worry about the finances. Even if, God forbid this happened to somebody, you didn't get paid on a 20 or 30,000 or more job, it wouldn't cripple you.
Welcome to the Before You Buy or Sell a Business podcast, where we help buyers and sellers learn more about the acquisition process, discuss recent transactions, and stay up to date on the latest news in the market. Here's your host, Jared Johnson.
Hey everybody. All right, before we get into the next episode, I've had a lot of people reach out to me recently requesting to sponsor the show, and I've decided to go ahead and open that up. So if that's you and you're interested, please shoot me an email at Jared, which is Jared, at jaredwjohnson.com, and I'll get you some information over on how you can do that. Today we've got Thomas Perkins on, so we get a little special treat. We've got a seller who recently sold their business. A lot of times we have buyers or people that support the industry, so definitely excited to hear how a transaction went from your point of view. So maybe we can start off with your background, where you grew up, if you went to college, any of that fun stuff.
All right. Well, I grew up in outside of Atlanta, Georgia, Cobb County. Background originally was my dad was a barber, so I was a barber for a while. I decided I did not want to do that, so I went to school for X-ray tech. Decided I did not want to do that. Then I went to finish my degree around 30. Went to work for Otis Elevator, some clients of mine through the barbering business. I did that for a few years, corporate America. Realized I didn't want to do that. I like kind of doing my own thing and not having people tell me what to do. So I transferred to Las Vegas with Otis Elevator. Was there for a couple of years. Then decided to do my own kind of business. So I took a big risk and took a straight commission only job. Started selling fitness equipment mainly to apartment communities and hotels and through a dealer that I worked for. And then I had people approach me because I was with the customers already that did apartments and the the hotel industry. They said, "Hey, you wanna sell some patio furniture?" I'm like, "Well, I guess I'm already dealing with those customers," and it made sense. I started. I became a rep for multiple lines of patio furniture, and I'm a rep also for the fitness company, and I'm in a like a warehouse space with a office and taking deliveries in the back and working my butt off, and I realized I was making everybody else money and I was making money myself, but I realized the potential of just becoming, I was like, it's really difficult to manage multiple companies repping for them. You got paperwork with every separate company, invoicing separate companies, getting paid by separate companies. So I finally decided to incorporate all of that into a dealer situation where I became the dealer and I just bought the products and I sold them to the customers, and I could manage it and make the customer happy without the minimal amount of paperwork and red tape and corporate stuff. So I did that for quite a few years until the market kind of took a big turn during the downtrend of the housing market, and during that time I took on a partner who had lost his job. He was a friend of mine, and eventually I just kind of wanted to get out of Vegas. Sold the company to him, and went to Texas for a while. I actually a short time in Dallas and a short time in Prescott, Arizona, trying to find myself or whatever, and then ended up taking a job back in LA area or Orange County with the company that I actually sold fitness equipment for back in Las Vegas in the beginning, like 12, 15 years prior. So did that for a few years and networked my way into the mostly apartments, and Southern California is pretty much my 99% of my business base. And I realized I really miss working for myself and controlling my own destiny. So around 2014, I started my company back up selling primarily outdoor furniture and outdoor products, um, cabanas and replacement cushions and furniture and grills and park benches and all that sort of different things. And I plugged myself in with some big companies, got on the vendor list, and just basically grew the business. In the meantime, I also became a rep for a furniture company that I had been a distributor for in the past. So I originally kind of started as a rep, but then I realized making 7% of, even $1 million is not enough to live on, or $2 million, you're barely living. So that's why I switched back and started becoming a dealer again. So I maintained my rep status, but I bought from the company as a rep, sold the product to the end user. I handled all the finances and the purchase orders and managing it and making sure it got delivered and that sort of thing. So I grew that business to around annual income of about, or gross income of about 3.5 million a year, but just really worked my butt off. I had some help during COVID, right before COVID. I hired somebody, trained her, and COVID hit, and that really hurt the business because of they just closed down commercial facilities. They weren't allowing it to happen. Long story short, I just grew it, and I was married to it. During the busy season, spring and beginning of summer, it's like 12, 15-hour days. I had conference call with my installer and cushion guy at 1 a.m. a few years back. It was so busy, just we couldn't get time to talk. So that's why I just burned myself out, and I enjoyed growing the business, but I did a good job after the housing market situation. I restructured how I saved money and where I put the money, and came out with enough to kind of sit back and not work so hard. That's why I decided to sell it.
Yeah, well, that was some great feedback there on your background. So maybe we can back up a little bit. So it sounded like you kind of were constantly trying to find something that you really felt connected to. And so during, you're starting out as a barber and then kind of hopped to a couple different things. What do you think it was that you were like searching for now looking back, that you seem to have kind of understood what it was that motivated you and got you to want to stick with a certain industry or a certain career path?
Well, as a barber, I learned a lot about people and about what they did for a living. I worked in a
Mm.
nice part of town where I cut people's hair that were outside sales reps for medical equipment companies and big, Coca-Cola and Kodak and all these big companies. And I was like, I had this dream like, oh yeah, I want to go be a salesman. I want to travel around and play golf with people. But I realized I hate traveling. I really don't like golf. But I enjoyed the opportunity to make money without physically doing something every minute of every day to make that money. And that's what barbering or working for a big company is. You decide you want to take off 3 weeks, and the company might say no. So I felt like I wanted the ability to control the amount of money I made, or at least as much as my time would allow, and be able to say no or yes to whatever I wanted, not have to worry about a boss.
Yeah, so it seems like you did enjoy sales though to a certain extent, just maybe not having to travel and play golf.
Selling for
So
yourself is different than selling for somebody else.
that's true.
Constantly like reports and what's the word I'm looking for? Where you have these sales goals that you have to meet
Hmm.
these goals, and
Your
why
quota,
didn't you meet
yeah.
your goal, or why didn't you see enough? It's like I've never been problem. I never needed that to motivate myself. I just like, hey, I just want to make a living. Everybody says, do you have a budget? No, I just spend less than I make. It's like I've never went and got really detailed about all the paperwork and reporting. I just like to go out and do my job, and the money will come if you do a good job at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, some great feedback there. So the business that you recently sold, what year did you start that business?
That was the one I said it's roughly around 2014.
Okay.
Um,
So you had made it through as a rep during kind of the Great Recession, as everybody's called it. Um, Started to kind of see some daylight and said, "Hey, I want to start this business and kind of get back into something that you knew." What were some of the biggest challenges when you started that business up?
Well, as you grow, one of the hardest things is, I had financial issues back during the financial crisis because I had a bunch of houses. So that really affected my personal credit. And when you're a brand new business and you got to go out there and you got to sell, large quantities of expensive stuff, you got to have credit lines. And so, I mean, I've trained myself. As soon as I get a bill, I pay it as soon as I, can at least, and then you got to just, work. I'm working with the new buyers right now, helping them figure out how to get the credit lines they need in order for the business to run smoothly. So getting large amounts of credit when you're coming out of a situation that was not easy, it took a little time, but fortunately my company grew gradually, so I didn't need, hundreds of thousands right out of the gate, but it became necessary as the business grew.
So in the first year, do you feel like not having enough working capital or credit lines kind of constrained your ability to take on more growth, or were you just meeting the demand that you had at the point?
In the beginning, no, because I didn't have enough business.
Mm,
But as the business grew within like year two, three, four, five, that's when it became important. I remember
okay.
telling my dad, like when I was really getting this thing started, I could see it. I could see the opportunities coming, and I was like, "Wow, I just really need $100,000 to just stick in the bank just to make life easier because it really does take capital." And so one of the reasons I think I'm
You're
successful
talking about taking out
is
the
I
red
cut out all
tape
the
of
red tape of the
being corporate.
corporations and the big companies. So for instance, when you're in an apartment community and you finally get an opportunity to sell something to a community, when you start, emailing them a bunch of credit applications to fill out, and they work for these big, companies that have hundreds of apartments, they don't want to mess with that. Like they just want to make things easy. So I never ask one client to fill out a credit app because I'm not working with mom and pop, companies. I'm working with big corporations. So I did all that in the background with my vendors. I got the credit lines. I went out and made sure that it was really easy for my customer to do business with me. But I had to be sure I had the liquidity on my backside of the business to do that.
Wow, that's some great advice. So really, if you didn't do that and you made it more challenging for them, do you think you would have grown a lot, slower
No.
or even had a business at all?
Yeah, it would have been very difficult. One of the things I didn't mention that I started doing for some of my customers that have been really a nice little side income stream is I have one particular management company that they're very, very stringent on vendors. Like they won't let, or actually on the properties, they won't let the property go out and buy anything unless it's from the vendor on a vendor's list that has particular, quality qualifications with insurance and this and that. And so if they want to, let's say, do a taco truck for their property for an event, or hire a singer, or have a third party, fitness instructor at the senior property come in and teach aerobics, or if they have an emergency sewer backup and they need somebody to come in and fix the problem, or whatever it is, they were like not allowing the properties to go out and get what they needed to do what they, to provide the service. So I just said, look, I'll do whatever you need. Like if you need me to order something on Amazon, or pay for your entertainer, or sewer backup, or clean out your dryer vents, or fix your pool, it doesn't matter. I got the insurance to cover all that. And I went out and, made sure they had the insurance coverage. I get the W-9 from the vendor. I pay them. I invoice the property, and I charge them 10% with a minimum of $50. So, a lot of people are like, oh, $50, that's not enough. But I've done deals as high as $80,000 at 5% or at 10%. Even when if I cut them a deal on it, it's still a lot of money for knowing very little. You just put it on your credit card and then invoice the property. So that was one little side business that's really panned out for me.
So you were an approved vendor, so they were allowed to work with you. So you just helped them with some of the other stuff. So that's very intuitive. So you decided to find a way to make your customers, life a little bit easier, so they would continue to work with you on basically all aspects. That was really
Right.
smart
Yeah.
of you.
Once you get them engaged, they're just like, he's the go-to guy. Just call Thomas. He'll take care of you. So that's kind of where I became, this one particular customer, like almost, half the properties knew who I was, and they had, 100 plus properties. So it made it,
Yeah.
real easy on the, when they're not ordering patio furniture in the middle of winter, it's nice to get, to be able to make money doing other things. So that was kind
Yeah.
of nice.
You thought outside the box and you made their life easier. So you were willing to do what it takes to get the business. So it makes sense. So in your first year, do you remember what your revenue was?
I could look it up, but it wasn't a
Just
lot. I
best
mean,
guess.
yeah, well, I think the first year I kind of was like more just acting as a rep.
Okay.
And so I only make 7%, and I still had some residual income from the job that I had left. And I
Mm,
was like, maybe made 60, 70,000 the first year. I don't know what the
okay.
company revenue was. I'm just thinking about what I probably made. I just bought a
Well,
brand new house, so I was kind of like put myself in a position where you have to succeed, right? So,
yeah, it's funny how that works sometimes, huh?
yeah.
It's probably not the best way we would tell someone to do it, but at the end of the day, you put yourself against the wall, you're gonna find a way to work yourself out of
I've
it.
done
So
that multiple times to myself, and I figure out how to dig my way out of the hole. So,
it's a life of a business owner, I guess.
yes.
So, was there a certain period during the business that you felt you maybe kind of rounded a corner, things got a little bit easier and smoother, and you started to kind of hit your stride? And if so, was there something that changed during that period?
Well, as we discussed before, a big part of that was having the credit lines and living well below your means. And the buyers that bought my company, I'm like, just don't even worry about taking money out of it. Just keep putting money in and don't take anything out. And in a couple of years, you'll be in a position that you can take on any job that comes your way. You never have to worry about the finances. Even if, God forbid this happened to somebody, you didn't get paid on a 20 or 30,000 or more job, it wouldn't cripple you. Like
Mm.
if somebody would have just, stiffed me on 50K in the last few years, I would have hated it and I would have complained and I would have done what I needed to do to try to collect my money, but it wouldn't have stopped me from doing business. It wouldn't have put me in a position. So, I sold my old business to a very good friend of mine, and he's, doing twice the business in Vegas that I used to do now. And he still struggles. Like, I'm like, why can't you pay your bills on time? Like I don't understand that. Like my concept is just pay everything, keep a 800 plus FICO score, and just keep rolling with it and make sure your customers, if you have any struggles that's in the background, don't tell them, just take care of them and make yourself look good on the other end.
Yeah, that's some great advice. So, at what point did you decide you wanted to sell the business? Was that always the goal in mind, to grow the business to a certain level and sell it, or did you just decide it was time to sell?
Well, I, I've been thinking about it for a long time. My goal back when I was in Vegas, I was very successful before the big housing crash, and I was very risky with real estate and things, and I was bringing in big money, and I had a goal to retire at 50. 50 came around, I was in no position to retire. So I'm now 56, and I got to the point where I felt like I thought I could do it a couple of years ago. And that's when COVID hit and the housing market started coming up, and everything got more expensive. And I thought, I really can't do it right now. It doesn't make sense. So um, I actually went back to Georgia for 6 months. I maintained, where I sold some houses, and I went back to Georgia, and I worked in my sister's basement and her basement apartment basically for 6 months, and just realized I needed to continue to work for a couple more years to get to the position where I really needed to be to retire based on how expensive things had gotten. And it was amazing. Like the last couple of years, it was just crazy how fast once you become successful, you get the business base, you keep your money in your company. It just started like really accumulating very quickly. And of course, you got to pay a lot of taxes, but that's okay. Um, so I was like, okay, I can do it now. I could, I had I had some health problems. I had a hip replacement. I got to do another one. Sitting at a chair for 12 hours a day is not good for your body. And
Yeah, I
got
know how
family
that
heart
is.
issues. I just wanted to like start living a little bit, even because I spent all my time working and making money, but you got to like enjoy your life too. So
Yeah.
the challenge for me is I was always worried about selling a company that like mine because I didn't have a brick and mortar coffee shop where you could walk into and see what I did. It was really hard for me to relay to someone what I do for a living and how I make money.
Yeah, that makes sense. So once you ultimately felt you were ready to sell and retire, what did you do at that point? What steps did you take to get the business ready for sale? And then ultimately, how did you get it to market?
So very interestingly, I was actually one of my kind of friends through the business has a company very similar to mine in the Phoenix area, and he sold his company to a guy who was buying up similar companies. And the Phoenix area, we actually do business together. I buy some things from him, he buys some things from me, and we had some interaction. And so I was like, hey, I'm looking at selling mine. Are you interested in buying my company? And we started talking. The problem was he's trying to do multiple business purchases, and he did not want to like just flat out buy it up front, and he wanted to drag it out for multiple years and make payments. And I was like, if I do that, then I'm basically, by the time I hand the company over, I could have just worked for 2 more years and made that much money. So it didn't make sense to me to do it that way. And randomly, I get an email, and you obviously know Monty from
Mhm.
the broker. I got this email in my inbox one day, and it just said, "Hey, are you looking to sell your business? If you're interested, give me a call." Blah blah blah. And I just kind of left it in my inbox and flagged it, and I didn't really respond for a little while. And then I got thinking, I'm like, okay, so I don't know what's going to happen with the economy. Things are weird. My business is, at its peak right now that I've had so far. COVID is over, and it's wintertime. So I thought, hey, wintertime would be a good time to market my company because I'm not as busy. I have time to deal with stuff like that. So I finally emailed him back sometime in December, set up a meeting. Abel and Monty and I met at a Starbucks and just kind of hashed out everything. And, we had it listed like pretty quickly. And, fortunately for me, they already had somebody in the pipeline on their other side that was ready to purchase a business, some kind of, they didn't know what kind of business. They just wanted something they could work from home, had, nice margins in it. And from the time we got the listing to the offer was less than 30 days, which for my company, I thought would take years to sell. So, because I didn't want to be dealing with it, in the busy season. I don't want to have to like go to meetings and answer a bunch of questions. I'm like during, March through June, July, I was like, it's so busy. I don't have time for that. So I'll give you like 4 months to if you can find a buyer in 4 months, then we'll do it. Otherwise, I got to put it on hold. And they actually did it. So it's pretty
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah, that's a great story for a lot of sellers. I think that are kind of in your position, how you mentioned you were nervous about if you'd be able to get it done in time, or, if somebody would even want to buy it, right? I mean, most people, they kind of have this idea in their head that the business needs to have a certain look to it, or a certain feel, or a certain industry type to be sellable. And that was kind of the main reason I even wanted to start the podcast. Was there's a lot of people that don't even know that you can sell or you can buy a business. So it's nice to hear that you did feel that way, but then you got connected with the right person who, oddly enough, cold emailed you about selling. And so obviously that's a good lesson for people out there too, that cold calling and reaching out, marketing does work. But it sounds like they were the right people.
And believe me, I get so many junk emails that, I just immediately ignore. And I guess because I was looking, that's something I was thinking about doing. And maybe that's the reason I didn't just delete that one right off the bat. So,
Yeah, well, it obviously
yeah.
worked out, especially if they had a buyer for you. So, what was kind of your initial feeling once you met the buyer and started kind of discussing or negotiating to buy?
Well, I had some real reservations in the beginning because I've had a lot of, like combined experience, almost 20 years experience in the industry. And, some of the things when I met them, they're very nice people. And I was like, well, have you ever run a business? No. Do you know QuickBooks? No. Like there wasn't a lot of experience in what I do. And I was, very worried about, like, you can't just take this thing over and understand it in even a year. I mean, it's going to take time. So that was my biggest reservation is I assumed all along that somebody that bought it would be already kind of in the business and was looking to expand or, add some additional products or whatever, but had experience. So these guys were like, I was like, wow, you guys, and the one thing that I would recommend, I don't really know what the process normally is to buying and selling a business, but I think they needed to be probably more aware of what I did. But the good news is, I've been helping them a lot. We got an office together. When the transition happened, it took longer to close the loan than we expected. So I started working with the wife, well before the close because they really needed it. And we also decided to I said, there's no way you're going to be successful if you start changing the name of the company, because we're connected to all these payment systems and vendor networks and everything, and like you need to keep it the same. So we made sure it was a stock sale, so everything could remain the same. The sales, the resale number, the tax ID number, the W-9. The only thing that changed in the entire company really, ownership, and then it became a C corp versus an S corp, and so everything kind of remained the same. And I was stressing over that. I was like, I can't sell to these people and know they're going to fail unless they know what they're getting into. So that's why I suggested, as soon as possible, we need to start working together. And we rented a second, like a little office just to kind of meet and start working together to figure out how this thing works.
Yeah, that's some great advice. We don't have that happen very often. A lot of times there's this big, kind of wall between the buyer and seller during negotiations or during, the due diligence and working on getting it closed. And I do find that if the buyer seller get along, the quicker you can start working on the business and working in the business with the seller, the easier it is for a buyer to be able to take over the business and kind of hit the ground running. A lot of times, the buyer seller don't end up getting along and it doesn't work out. But it sounds like you had a good fit from that standpoint. So it's great to hear that you were willing to start working with them ahead of time. And then also the foresight of using a stock purchase. There's a lot of times where somebody in your business, and you did hit on this, they don't understand that when you take over the business, a lot of times you have relationships with vendors and you have terms with vendors, or even a contract with a vendor, or a lot of times people have contracts with like the government or a school district and things like that. And what they don't realize is that you have to go back through the entire process again of being approved if you do it as an asset purchase.
It would have been a total nightmare for them. And
Right.
unfortunately, well, you touched on, vendors. My biggest vendor. It's kind of interesting because like I said, I'm still a rep for one of the furniture companies that they buy from, and it's probably their biggest vendor. So I'm committed to their success because it's also going to help me. Even though I'm not semi-retired, I would say, because I'm still have two clients, and that's my old company I sold and my new company I sold. So those are going to be my only two clients that I'm going to be working with, but I'm going to be a rep, and they're bigger volume dealers. So as long as they keep buying furniture, I have minimal amount of work to do and still can make income. It's not going to be like what I was making before, but my time is going to be cut by 80% or more. So it was, obviously I want them to be successful. So I want them to, but my point was the vendor that I buy the most furniture from, that I'm also the rep for, they would not allow them to take over the existing terms. So I've even agreed, to help the new buyers, like, they have great credit, but they didn't have any kind of industry credit, like they've never owned a business. So just because you can go out and get a credit card anywhere you want to go buy whatever personal stuff you want, that doesn't translate into business credit. And so I've actually, stepped in and I'm helping them a little bit on the financial side, just to be sure that they can be healthy through until they can get the credit with the vendor.
Yeah, that's great.
So
Yeah, and that's something that I typically will talk to a buyer about and try to get them to understand doing during their due diligence period. They need to really get in and understand how the business works, how it operates from start to finish, whatever it is that they're doing, they need to completely understand all the insides and outs of it so that that way when they take over the business, if there's something they need to work on now, then they can address it rather than get in there and go, oops, I accidentally bought this and I wasn't prepared for it. And, we've had several people call and say, it's taken me 3 or 4 or 5 months to get approved with a vendor. And during that time, you still have things going out the door. You have expenses adding up. A lot of people have a payroll that they've got to make. And so it can be very challenging if you don't have enough working capital. So I'm glad you were willing to share that with them and really explain it to them. So that was great. So looking back, did you have any, if you have somebody kind of in your position that is looking to sell and they have a buyer approach them, what advice would you give them and what are the things you would tell them to look out for?
now you mean like a buyer through a broker, or just a
Either
buyer
way.
in general?
Yeah. Yeah, either way,
Uh,
yeah.
well, I mean, I would definitely say you want to make sure that you have a broker that really understands the process. I mean, I will say Abel Chavez has been a very big help. Like, he went out of his way to make sure all the documentation. I mean, it's a very complicated loan that, as you know, that the buyers got, and it was a lot of paperwork and a lot of understanding. And the stock sale is not like you said, like an asset sale. It's very difficult, and he was very helpful in getting all the questions answered. And I think you're aware of the 401, or the, what do they call,
They did a
Rob's
Rob's, yeah.
loan. Yeah, it was very complicated. I think they would have probably not gone that route if they would have understood the challenges with it. They would have just got a traditional business loan or whatever. But it was a lot of work, and having a good broker to make sure that you get your questions answered, and you were there when we had questions for you to get answered, and it just made the process a lot better. I mean, it took, unfortunately, it took longer than I anticipated to close. So then we're getting, we're like getting into the very stressful time of the year while we're still trying to get the loan closed. So I'm basically, at some point in time, I said, look, I have to like start giving you incoming business even before I close, because what tends to happen is during the busy time of the year, you get large orders, you invoice the customer 50%. So that invoice money is coming back to me. But then at the end of that, you have the payment to the vendor and then the collection of the last 50, but that's upside down. Like, you're going to be losing money on that deal because I've already collected the 50%. So that's why at some point I said, okay, we're just going to start putting all new orders in your name, even though they didn't even own the company yet, in order to get them into a cash flow situation where when they close, they had already profit in the business.
Yeah, that was a great thing for you to do. We do get time to times where sellers are saying, "Nope, that's all mine. All the accounts receivable, everything is mine." And I try to get them to understand you're setting up the buyer to fail. They need to be able to step right in and not have to have a huge amount of working capital laying there that they're basically drawing from until they can make their own sales and then collect on their own sales. So yeah, that was great of you. So
Well, we basically, I have you have, reports that you pull in QuickBooks, and it tells you your, balance sheet, and,
mhm.
whether it's accrual or cash. But I also have a separate spreadsheet that I plug all those numbers into. And then, because QuickBooks doesn't account for open sales orders and open purchase orders, I have an invoice. So I can plug all those numbers in. And it's like, okay, if I took all my cash out, where are you going to sit, right? And they were going to be upside down. So I prepaid some orders that I already had invoiced, and I started giving them orders before they came in. So by the time they took over officially, they were like sitting at 100,000 in profit, because I knew it would be, they would not be able to make that happen if they didn't have something to work with.
Yeah, that was great of you to do that. Where are you going from here?
Um, I'm gonna do some traveling. I got to get my other hip
Cool.
replaced.
Oh,
Got some cruises to go on, stuff to do, but I still got to be available. Be able to get some
yeah.
email, make sure that orders are being processed from the 2 customers that I still have,
Yeah,
and
that'll be nice to travel.
yeah, definitely, and not having to. I mean, I went on a cruise last year in the Mediterranean. We went to a wedding in Italy and made a longer trip out of it. But I was like, you know, it's terrible that you have internet on the cruise ships now because you end up working while you're on vacation. So
Yeah.
it'll be nice to not feel the pressure when you're traveling, for
Yeah,
sure.
that'll be great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a lot of great information. At the end, I always ask 2 questions. So the first one I'll ask is, do you have a mentor, or did you ever have a mentor?
Not really on only my own business mentor, but I did have a couple of people in my life that were very helpful. One of them was my sales manager for my old exercise equipment company. His name is Bruce. He was awesome. And I think being a barber, meeting all these successful people, finding out what they do for a living, and having motivation more than a mentor made me. My dad's always been a super hard worker, but he unfortunately did not, invest that well and didn't, he just worked really hard and worked a lot of hours, but he didn't create a lot of wealth. So I didn't want to be in, even though he's a great person and he's been a great, I guess, mentor as a father, but I learned things from him that I didn't want to do, but I also learned a lot that I did want to do. So being a business owner, I kind of just struck out on my own. And even when I was a barber, I was a self-employed barber. I just rented a station. Sound like people telling me when to come in and all that sort of thing. So I guess I'm self-motivated in some to some degree.
Yeah, that's great. Great answer. So, next question and last question, what motivates you? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit right here, but you sold your business for 7 figures. You've worked hard. You've made it through, the Great Recession. You've had a lot of ups and downs, and you've been successful at the end of the day. But what motivates you?
Wow, that's a good question. I struggle with that myself. I think that a lot of free time is not good for me. So having something I like to do helps motivate me. Like right now, I'm in the process of. I have a guy I've known he's from Guatemala. He hasn't been able to get a social security number, and we're buying a house in Lake Elsinore, and he's gonna basically I'm owner finance, and we'll buy it and then finance for him. Gives me little projects I like to. I built a house during before and during COVID. Like I basically was a management contract. Wasn't a physical contractor, but I managed the process. So I like to have projects to do. I don't like sitting around reading. I like messing with the stock market. I love to exercise when my body cooperates. So
Yeah.
it's a tough question.
Yeah, well, if you have quite a few answers of different things that motivate you for different things that come up in life, so I think either way, it sounds like you just enjoy the process of things and going through them. So that's great. I really appreciate you coming on, and I also definitely want to say thank you for being one of the good sellers. One that is willing to work with a buyer, one that handed off a business the right way. You're still there to help them be successful. Oddly enough, that doesn't always happen, and most of the time it isn't that way. So, on behalf of the bank that took a chance on the buyer, I really appreciate you, sticking with them and working hard to make sure they're successful. That was great.
Well, you're very welcome. I was the day that we closed. I was thinking about in my head. I was gonna mess with them. I was gonna come in and say, "Well, we'll see you later," and just run out the door to see what they did. But I didn't have the heart to do it.
Oh man, that was great. So well, cool. Well, thank you so much. I'm sure if you ever decide to buy another business or get into something else, let me know, and we'll get you back on the other side of this. So really appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening. We hope you found this podcast informative and helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. For more information, or if you'd like to discuss a transaction, please go to www.jaredwjohnson.com.